Everyone knew her as Granny, the delightfully doddering matriarch on the Beverly Hillbillies. Yet behind that twinkling smile lay a lifetime of triumphs and tragedies few ever suspected. Picture a harsh Texas frontier town at the turn of the 20th century. Dusty streets, the rumble of troop movements at Fort Bliss, and the shadow of revolution creeping across the border. Into this world was born Jessie Irene Noble on October 17, 1902. Her childhood could not have been more different from the Hollywood lot she would eventually grace. It was raw, unpredictable, and soaked in the grit of survival. From the very start, young Irene tasted scarcity. Food was sometimes a rumor, clothing a luxury, and safety a fleeting promise. Her father, James Noble, labored as an army sergeant on a modest salary that evaporated beneath the weight of rising costs and surging conflict. El Paso, swelled by refugees and revolutionaries fleeing the Mexican Revolution, became a combustible mix of desperation and hope. The Noble family scraped together shelter in a small ramshackle home near downtown, its walls trembling every time crisis stirred across the Rio Grande. Amid this turmoil, Irene found her first escape on a makeshift stage. At 11, she snatched a $3 first prize in a San Francisco talent contest. $3. Barely enough to buy a decent meal. Became her treasure, not for its monetary value, but for the thunderous applause it earned. In that moment, she glimpsed a future beyond hunger and harsh winters. Her mother, Katie McSherry, fresh from Ireland and wary of stagecraft's pitfalls, warned that show business was attended by the devil himself. But that chorus of claps drowned out any cautionary voice. Driven by that spark, Irene defied her years and the law. To join a California theater troupe, she simply claimed she was old enough. Under her vaudeville moniker, she roamed from Sacramento to San Jose, Phoenix to El Paso, performing 8 shows a week in roving tents and creaking theaters. Audiences jeered the weak and hoisted the strong on their shoulders. Rotten Tomatoes flew like furious punctuation marks. Yet she thrived. Her voice, clear, powerful, tinged with determination, rose above the cacophony, and by 16 she was already billed as the stylish little star who could wring laughter from the most cynical crowd. These early struggles forged a blueprint for her approach to fame: grit over glamour, tenacity over entitlement. She learned that no guarantee of tomorrow meant you danced on stage today with every ounce of your being. But while onstage she projected joy, offstage the real Irene Ryan tucked away her dreams and doubts. Her sister Anna, 17 years her senior, had long left home by the time Irene spoke her first word, leaving her to eavesdrop on adulthood, to adopt the mannered tones of soldiers and shopkeepers, to listen and learn. That childhood solitude hammered into her an unspoken bargain. Attention and affection might be hollow without purpose, and applause without preparation was hollow noise. By age 20, she married comedian Tim Ryan, forging a partnership that mirrored the classic stage roles she would later inhabit, the flustered wife to the clever husband. Onstage, she fumbled lines and feinted stupidity. Offstage, she booked their tours, negotiated pay, and balanced ledgers with the precision of a banker. Their vaudeville shorts for educational pictures paid pocket change, just $100 or so per film, but offered a springboard onto network radio when NBC invited them to fill Jack Benny's prime time slot. The exposure was astronomical. Nearly 30% of American households tuned in each week. And in that spotlight, Irene discovered both her power and her limits. The endless rehearsals and the pressure to laugh on cue frayed her marriage, as public pressures mounted behind closed doors. After 2 decades together and no children to carry on their names, they divorced in 1942. For many performers, a divorce at 40 would herald an exit from center stage, but Irene pivoted. She embraced radio's golden age, trading silvery screen tests for the intimacy of the airwaves. Her smoky voice, honed by decades of hard living and stage smoke, became her signature. Audiences adored her candy store and library owner persona on CBS's Jack Carson show, and she earned $500 a week, more than she ever made on vaudeville circuits. Yet despite the security of steady work, film studios still saw her as a cliché barrels of laughs, compressed into a Halloween mask of an old lady. She was cast in 36 films between 1935 and 1952, most roles uncredited and all underpaid. The company she kept on screen never matched the confidence she held off it, and that double life, wild acclaim for a role so narrow, deepened her resolve to prove her range. Through every script and every broadcast, she gathered evidence for a comeback that would redefine her legacy. Then, in early 1962, something extraordinary happened. At 60 years old, Irene Ryan received the call that would eclipse decades of toil in vaudeville, radio, and film. Paul Henning, the creator of a new sitcom set in rural America, had a role that demanded authenticity. Granny Moses on the Beverly Hillbillies. Hiring directors doubted Irene's ability to look old enough. Yet when she arrived at the audition, she carried decades of lived experience in her posture and voice. She didn't just read lines. She embodied a mountain woman, defying every preconception. As she slipped on a shawl and a gray wig, she transformed before their eyes. The casting director, who initially hesitated, leaned in and whispered, "That's Granny." On September 26, 1962, the Beverly Hillbillies premiered, and Granny Moses was an instant sensation. Viewers were enchanted by this pint-sized mountain matriarch whose raspy chuckle carried the weight of Appalachian roads and kitchen fires, yet bore an unexpected kindness. Critics praised Irene's nuanced performance, the way she squinted against the California sun, the subtle tilt of her head, and that perfectly timed "Well, bless my soul." Social commentators lauded how she captured an entire folk tradition in a single quip. By the end of its first season, the show ranked in the top 10 Nielsen ratings. Newspapers ran feature stories. Television interviews filled her calendar, and fan mail poured into that modest Santa Monica address she still called home. Within months, Irene Ryan earned Emmy nominations in both 1963 and 1964 for Outstanding Supporting Actress, standing shoulder to shoulder with Mary Tyler Moore. She represented a testament to resilience. Yet behind the accolades, the same chain-smoking habit that lent her voice its gravelly charm was chipping away at her health. On set, she habitually lit one cigarette from another, a ritual as precise as her comedic timing. Co-star Max Baer Jr. recalled constant worry. Every cough, every ragged inhale seemed a potential prelude to disaster. But Irene refused to slow down. She arrived on set before sunrise, revised her lines for authenticity, and often challenged writers on Granny's dialect. She understood that to preserve the character's dignity, she had to protect its cultural roots. Despite earning an astonishing $500 in a year, a fortune by 1960s standards, Irene Ryan lived with remarkable frugality. Her residence at 107 Esparto Way in Santa Monica was a modest bungalow of 1,800 square feet built in 1915. Inside, mint green cabinets guarded a patchwork of memories, and her garden bloomed with bougainvillea that tangled freely around a cracked picket fence. There was no marble foyer or crystal chandeliers, just a battered sofa, a lace dolly, and shelves piled with scripts. She refused extravagant parties, preferring quiet evenings with a handful of friends or her beloved cats. Money, she believed, was only as valuable as the security it provided. She invested heavily in property and stocks, ensuring that Granny's estate would endure long after the laughter faded. On screen, Granny was surrounded by a quirky blend of relatives, jets wide, eyed daughter, Ellie Mae, and the comical ne'er-do wells who stumbled in and out of their lives. Off-screen, Irene grappled with solitude. Her 2 marriages, to Tim Ryan and later Harold E. Knox, both ended without children, and by the late 1960s, her immediate family had passed on. Friends described her as fiercely independent, yet acutely aware of a void. She once confessed that true happiness, for her, was elusive without someone to share it with. Letters from younger actors and eager producers filled her mailbox. But those connections could never replace family warmth, but retirement was never Irene's style. In October 1972, at age 70, she stepped onto the Broadway stage in Pippin, earning rapturous standing ovations for her 10-minute turn as Berthe, the wisecracking grandmother. Director Bob Fosse's intricate choreography and sharp direction would have intimidated younger performers, yet she tackled the routine with tireless vigor. Audiences rose to their feet night after night, and reviews praised her as the show's emotional anchor. Then, on March 10, 1973, during a Saturday matinee, calamity struck. Irene collapsed mid-song, clutching her chest as the lights dimmed on her final bow. What the crowd witnessed was not a planned flourish, but a stroke that would mark the beginning of the end. In the weeks that followed, doctors in Santa Monica delivered devastating news. Irene had an aggressive, inoperable brain tumor coupled with arteriosclerotic heart disease. Shielded from the full truth, she spent her final days believing she might recover. Instead, she lived out her last breaths in that bungalow, surrounded by silence. On April 26, 1973, just 47 days after her onstage collapse, Irene Ryan passed away at 70. The world's laughter dimmed, and her once vibrant home fell into disrepair. Collapsed roof beams, shattered windows, furniture rotting in dust. Yet in a final twist of grace, she bequeathed her entire $1 million estate to establish the Irene Ryan Foundation, granting thousands of aspiring actors the opportunity she had fought so hard to earn. With the rush of fanfare and the hush of empty soundstages behind her, Irene Ryan's legacy took on a life of its own, an echo that would ripple across generations of performers and fans alike. Though her name was forever linked to Granny, the real story of Jesse Irene Noble sparkles with contradictions. A woman who sought spotlight yet craved solitude, who commanded audiences while nursing a private ache. In the months following her death, newspapers and industry journals published brief obituaries that nodded to her Emmy nods and sitcom fame, but glossed over the depth of her journey. It was as if the world preferred the cheerful mountain matriarch to the tenacious vaudeville wanderer and the pioneering radio star. That shallow remembrance chaffed at those who knew her truth, and it set the stage for a deeper reckoning with her contributions. By the late 1970s, a handful of television historians and cultural critics began excavating the full breadth of her career. They dug into dusty archives of educational pictures shorts, unearthed 1930s radio scripts, and tracked down surviving vaudeville posters clipped to walls in forgotten theaters. Each discovery revealed a facet of Irene's artistry, her uncanny knack for timing, her capacity to improvise when cue cards faltered, and her refusal to play smaller than she felt inside. Critics noted how, even in the roughest pre-war stage productions, she sidestepped caricature, allowing her characters grace and complexity. These retrospective studies fueled a modest scholarly movement dedicated to honoring early female comics, a niche corner of performing arts programs that now counted Irene among its patron saints. Meanwhile, on the lot where her most famous work was filmed, young writers and producers discovered in Granny Moses a model for situational comedy that balanced caricature with heartfelt sincerity. Her one-liners became case studies in comedic writing classes. How a single placed pause, or an upward inflection could make a joke land with unexpected warmth. Directors cited her as an early architect of ensemble comedy, someone who understood that a show's rhythm depended on each player's willingness to share space without overshadowing others. In effect, she became a template for character actors striving to make every scene matter, a guidepost for television performers who believed an iconic role could be both wildly funny and disarmingly human. Her foundation, established through the $1 million bequest she arranged in her final will, carried this mission forward. The Irene Ryan Scholarships, administered in partnership with the Kennedy Center, American College Theater Festival, turned her former isolation into communal opportunity. In countless regional theaters and university stages across America, aspiring actors discovered both financial aid and the belief that, like Irene, they could transcend their origins. Each year, one national winner and multiple regional honorees received funding to pursue further training, support that directly reflected the struggles Irene once faced to earn her first Gaudi plum on a vaudeville marquee. For many recipients, a small check inscribed with her name serves as a talisman proof that perseverance can outlast fortune. Interviews with scholarship alumni often return to a similar theme: gratitude for a chance they might never have had otherwise. One Midwestern student recalls first learning about Irene Ryan through her foundation's brochure tucked inside an audition packet. The story of a poor Texas girl who lied about her age to join a theater troupe resonated deeply with someone auditioning for the very same discipline. Another winner from the Pacific Northwest describes standing in a Nashville scholarship competition and feeling a frisson of kinship with someone who never stopped moving from town to town in search of a stage. Even decades after her passing, she speaks through these young performers. Her tenacity echoed in their auditions, her confidence mirrored in their acceptance speeches. On social media, the hashtag #FegGrannyLegacy has become a hidden rallying point for pop culture enthusiasts and theater geeks alike. Fans post vintage clips of her raspy chuckle, tag co-stars reminiscing about her precise cigarette-to-cigarette lighting ritual, and share photos of her Santa Monica bungalow before decay claimed its rafters. Documentaries in the streaming era, often produced on shoestring budgets, have spotlighted her extraordinary arc from scrappy child performer to Emmy-nominated sitcom star and Tony hopeful. Each documentary restores layers to her memory: the hunger that drove her, the self-reliance that saved her, the generosity that outlived her. Where once the world saw only Granny, now it uncovers Jess Irene Noble, a woman who refused to surrender her story. Perhaps the most poignant testament to her impact is the growing movement to preserve her former home at 107 Esparto Way. Community activists and local historians have campaigned to stabilize the crumbling structure, envisioning a small museum dedicated to her life's work. Though funding remains limited, the project underscores a broader impulse to honor those who shape culture without expecting eternal recognition. In an age where celebrity can be both instantaneous and ephemeral, Irene Ryan's story reminds us of a steady flame that burns long after the final bow. Her house, once a dilapidated shell, may yet become a beacon for dreamers, remembering that every stage begins with a single courageous step. Even decades after her performance as Granny, Irene Ryan's influence on television comedy remains profound. Contemporary actors and writers often cite her timing and her deceptively simple line deliveries as revolutionary. They marvel at how her characters could feel both authentic and larger than life within a few moments on screen. In acting classes, students study footage where she pauses just before delivering a witty remark to create anticipation. That subtle hesitation taught generations of performers how to balance expectation and surprise in comedic timing. At seminars focused on television history, scholars dissect her famous squint and her angled, "Well, bless my soul," utterance. They note how bodily posture and facial expression reinforced her mountainous background in every scene. Even today, costume designers referencing Granny's shawl and bonnet draw inspiration directly from her television wardrobe. One designer explained that those layers of tattered fabrics and muted colors instantly conveyed character backstory. Academic articles on rural representation in media often begin their analysis with a chapter examining Irene Ryan's work. She managed to embody both the stereotype of an Appalachian matriarch and an empathetic, individualized figure. Through that duality, she challenged simplistic portrayals and opened the door for more nuanced rural characters. Sitcom formats evolved but retained echoes of her approach, a charming eccentric whose quirk softens interpersonal conflicts. In many modern comedies, producers hope to replicate Granny's ability to diffuse tension with a single clever quip. They search for actors who can deliver warmth and skepticism, all within 50 seconds of screen time. Yet when new performers try to emulate her, they often realize that her style came from lived experiences. It was her childhood in rough towns, her nomadic vaudeville years, and her battles with skepticism that shaped her voice. That authenticity cannot be faked, as countless auditions have shown, and young actors now face her legacy directly. Meanwhile, fan conventions dedicated to classic television draw crowds eager to celebrate characters like Granny Moses. These gatherings feature panel discussions, costume contests, and trivia games that revolve around her most memorable lines. Attendees sometimes remark that her humor still resonates because it combines cultural specificity with universal human themes. Her depiction of elder wisdom and stubborn independence strikes a chord with viewers of all ages. For tech-savvy fans, online forums delve deep into episode transcripts, analyzing how she manipulated timing for comic effect. They highlight moments when she shifts volume or pace to magnify her punchlines or comedic contradictions. In those digital discussions, newcomers often discover her work for the first time, typifying her ongoing cultural rediscovery. Streaming platforms have added Beverly Hillbillies episodes to their classic collections, introducing Granny Moses to new audiences. Curators often tout her role as a masterclass in character acting when promoting these nostalgic archives. Popular culture references spill into modern television, with characters occasionally quoting Granny's signature idioms. Even commercials parodying rural archetypes nail their meager authenticity by borrowing her speech rhythms. This persistent homage signals how deeply she imprinted on collective entertainment memory. Even long after her passing, libraries and museums sometimes feature exhibits on early television, spotlighting her wardrobe, scripts, and personal artifacts. Researchers study her handwritten notes that reveal a meticulous perfectionism behind each improvised line. Her notes indicate that she rewrote dialogue to ensure Granny's voice matched the folklore she carried. This behind-the-scenes diligence stands in contrast to the breezy persona she projected before live audiences. That tension between informal charm and rigorous preparation became her hallmark performance duality. It reminds aspiring performers that off-screen labor often underpins the most effortless-looking moments. Yet alongside admiration, some critics still debate her typecasting as a comedic grandmother figure. They argue that beyond Granny Moses, Hollywood rarely offered her complex roles commensurate with her talents. Her film career in the 40s and 50s provided scant opportunities, relegating her to uncredited bits and supporting parts. Only television and late Career Broadway finally allowed her to transcend early career limitations. That vindication came too late to rescue her financially, emotionally, or medically, heightening the tragedy of her demise. But in intellectual circles, her story serves as both inspiration and cautionary tale about ageism in entertainment. It reminds industry professionals to value diverse talents regardless of age or appearance. In that sense, Irene Ryan's personal narrative continues burning as a beacon for inclusive casting practices. When drama schools host panels on career longevity, her name invariably surfaces alongside anecdotes from Granny's set. Students learn how resilience, self-advocacy, and creative agency shaped her remarkable 6-decade journey. They study her career not merely for its highlights, but for the determination that drove her forward. That lesson resonates deeply. Success may come late, but perseverance creates opportunities time cannot erase.